So good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and we are pleased to be here in Gallup, New Mexico today to give the community and the state an important update on the progress that we've made in establishing the first ever statewide crime gun intelligence center. As many of you know, this was an initiative that took our office several years to get up and running, but I firmly believe that through the use of both modern technology and cooperative relationships between law enforcement, that we could make a positive impact in not only reducing the amount of gun violence in our communities, but building cases that frankly would not have been put together in any other way. Since the launch of the Crime Gun Intelligence Center at the New Mexico Department of Justice in December of last year, our agencies have collectively processed over 2,000 ballistic acquisitions, resulting in 527 criminal incidents connected through CGIC leads. 50% of those leads represent guns or firearms that have crossed jurisdictional lines. And this is something that, when we announced the program, we had an intuition, a sense that most or many of the crime guns that we were encountering in our communities weren't staying in one community. They were actually moving and being used in crimes in Albuquerque and Gallup and Farmington and Roswell and different places. The data that we have in just a short period of time confirms that conclusion. And for example, one of the recovered firearms that has been tested through our system has been tied to 17 separate criminal events in different jurisdictions around the state. Over half of the firearms tied to CGIC lead have been recovered and taken off of the streets of New Mexico. 41% of CGIC leads have led to an arrest. And we now have partner departments that have grown from just a handful, including those that are represented here today, to over 30, with 13 new departments entering casings in July alone. I'd like to highlight just two recent examples that exhibit, I think, and demonstrate the power of this new approach and the power of the state's Crime Gun Intelligence Center. The first is a May 2025 Albuquerque homicide that sat unsolved with no weapon recovered, and a year later, the Gallup Police Department recovered a gun from a road rage shooting that endangered children, and NIBIN matched that same firearm to the Albuquerque case, giving the Albuquerque Police Department a link and a lead to follow that they didn't previously have. In March of 2026, the shooting in a Gallup home that left no weapon and no lead. A routine traffic stop 3 months later turned up several firearms, including 2 in a vehicle carrying juveniles. NIBIN matched 1 to the March shooting, connecting a proactive stop directly to an unsolved violent crime. Those are just a few of the examples that we now have from our various jurisdictions and our various partners of how this technology and, more importantly, the relationship upon which that technology relies is leading to the identification of suspects, the recovery of firearms, and solving of criminal cases, and hopefully the delivery of justice in not only this community, but communities all across the state. I'm proud to be joined today by members of our partner agencies. As many of you know, the initiative that we were working towards was geared around one really important concept, and that was to not just have this type of technology available in the metro area, available in Albuquerque and Santa Fe, because they've had those machines for quite some time. It was in recognition that rural communities and other communities that traditionally have to wait for the benefits of these technologies deserve to have access as much as anyone else. And so there were 4 sites that were selected around the state: Farmington, Gallup, Roswell, and Las Cruces. Those sites now have 4 NIBIN machines up and running. They've been up and running now for several months. And those serve as the hubs for all of the regional law enforcement agencies in the area. And through the dedication and outreach of the leaders that are here today and others who do similar work, we've been able to slowly expand the reach. And The ultimate goal is to have 100% coverage for the state of New Mexico, that we recover firearm casings in all 33 counties, in every community, and every law enforcement agency, test fires weapons that are recovered, and collect shell casings so that we can start to build these connections and strengthen these cases. And so key in that effort has been Chief Toadlena-Pablo here in the Gallup Police Department, and I'm happy and pleased to be joined with her today and have her leadership and engagement in this. And so with that, I'd invite the Chief to come say a few words.
Thank you very much, sir. I just wanted to emphasize, I know we gave a lot of cases there, that information as far as the cases that the Gallup Police Department has looked into, but I want to emphasize the importance of having this type of technology in this time of law enforcement. I think that when we do integrate our tools, that we'll be more successful as far as the Department of Community and overall as a state. Bringing that here and the different cases that we do have leads on. This morning I got the brief that we've had 40 different tips and leads that on the cases that we have done. What we're trying to do is to pass that information along to our law enforcement agencies around our area. This is just not a tool for the Gallup Police Department. This is a tool for law enforcement. So we want to make sure that we have our surrounding agencies and those who can come here to partake in that. Right now we have the Gallup FBI office who has utilized our NIBIN machine. We also have our Sheriff's Department, McKinley County Sheriff's Department, who's also in that. We have connected crimes that normally would have been sitting there for years. In that, we know that crime that happens here in McKinley County and the city of Gallup just doesn't stay here. Crime is unique. It continues to travel to not just within the state, to other cities, other jurisdictions, but also to other states throughout the United States. So I can't emphasize how important it is to have this here within our community and for it to be able to help law enforcement. It's made our job a lot easier. We understand the importance of shots fired call coming on in and gathering that evidence. Even though there was no leads, we didn't have any people that wanted to stay by, no victims, we are able to still process a type of crime there. But I just wanted to thank APD also being a partner in that. Has been mentioned earlier that we did have a homicide, that they had a homicide that just kind of was at a standstill. But with our officers going out proactively looking and gathering evidence, we were able to connect for them to be able to find the evidence for the firearm that was located here in our jurisdiction in the city of Gallup that was successful in helping them proceed in their charging for a homicide. I think we want to also not let our just law enforcement partners, but also our community, that if you do hear shots fired, if you do have, maybe you walk out and you see some casings, call your local law enforcement so we can gather those. I think that the public can also be a partner in that to fight crime within our area. But I can't emphasize the gratefulness that I do feel for the department coming in and bringing in an employee to work within our building. Kyler, I'm grateful for you and for the hard work that you do with your team and the process and the aggressiveness of making sure that we continuously meet with our investigators within the department and also reaching out to law enforcement. But thank you very much, and I'll go ahead and turn this time over now to the Sheriff, James Maiorano.
Well, thank you, Chief. James Maiorano, I'm the elected sheriff here in McKinley County, and the question that was asked is, what can a shell casing tell you? Can it actually tell a story? And the partnership that Attorney General Torrez has entered into with us and our partnership with the NMDOJ in this NIBIN project has already yielded us 3 answers just since January. And the first one was that a drive-by shooting happened in Phoenix PD where over 50 rounds were fired at a single car. One of those happened to be a 9mm. Fast forward 308 days, and the McKinley County Sheriff's Office gets a call from the New Mexico Department of Transportation that they found a firearm discarded on the side of the interstate. That firearm was tied back to that crime in Phoenix, Arizona, giving the investigators the opportunity to look at the last person who owned that firearm and give the investigation a place to go, which would have otherwise been dead and considered a closed case. Case number 2 is here local. Gallup Police Department handled a shots fired call with a gunshot victim, and 18 days later, we found that firearm on a person that was a suicidal subject. down south of town. When Kyler ran that, it came back to being the same firearm. These are cases that had no leads. These are cases that had no additional evidence. So what story can that shell casing tell you? It can tell you the entirety of its life. The information that we're being provided through this system is like nothing I've ever seen. It's technology being applied to fight back. The third and last case that we handled was an 18-month-long shooting spree in Albuquerque, New Mexico. For 18 months, they were on the run with a firearm back in 2020. Their gunshot detectors picked it up. There was a convenience store shooting. There was a domestic violence incident where the victim was shot. And this just continued time after time after time for 18 months. Eventually, one of our deputies stopped that person on the interstate trafficking 3,000 fentanyl pills, moving from Phoenix, Arizona to Albuquerque for its delivery point. If it wouldn't have been for this system, we would not have been able to tie all of those crimes together that occurred over several jurisdictions over the period of almost 2 years. So again, Attorney General Torrez, we thank you for the opportunity to have this technology, put it to use, and do something with it. Ultimately, this offers victims in all of our jurisdictions the opportunity for their day in court, whether it be their family members or the victim themselves. A case that they were told had gone completely cold and there was no more evidence to work on are now reopened. So thank you.
Good morning. My name's Director Jace Trujillo. I'm the Public Safety Director for Ohkay Owingeh Indian Reservation. Kind of here to talk to you about the NIBRS machines that we have. Obviously, as we know, criminals do not stay within their jurisdictional boundaries. We do have a lot of issues of crimes being committed within the Ohkay Owingeh Indian Reservation. We were one of the first departments to participate in this program. We tested over 80 firearms, as of which 2 have came back to cases that were involved within Albuquerque for shots fired and other numerous crimes that have occurred up there. I mean, as a smaller tribal community, it's important to have the cooperation and collaboration with these other agencies we have. As we know, like I said, crime travels everywhere. Utilization of these machines will really help us further our investigations and increase our overall intelligence, as well as collaboration with other agencies. With that, I'd like to thank AG here and for the assistance with this program. Thank you. Appreciate
it. Good morning. My name is Sergeant Eduardo Arreola. I'm an investigation supervisor for the Farmington Police Department. The NIBRS machine has been very great. We've been very grateful for the NIBRS machine. It's been very helpful with linking gun violence crimes, both old and new, within our jurisdiction, and as well as surrounding agencies and jurisdictions. The NIBRS machine is the NIBRS machine and its investigative leads are very essential to the detectives of the Farmington Police Department. They've allowed us to establish new investigative leads in old closed gun violence crimes and allowed us to follow up on them. It has also allowed us to link multiple scenes to a singular subject, such as a previous drive-by shooting that was unsolved in 2025. We are very grateful as the Farmington Police Department for the NIBRS machine, for the Department of Justice and its partnership that it's allowed us. And the support that it's provided. The Crime Gun Intelligence Center is going to support us in the future by test firing 300 guns currently in our evidence to enter them into NIBRS. And we are very, very grateful for that because of the lack of manpower and the availability to do that. So the Farmington Police Department is very grateful for the partnerships that are available through NIBRS and the future partnership and continue to investigate new investigative leads to solve old closed gun violence crimes. And we thank you.
So I just want to thank all of the committed law enforcement professionals and leaders that are assembled here today. I think you've heard just in a very short period of time how impactful this technology, how impactful this program has been, both in improving the cooperative relationships and the ability of law enforcement professionals to deliver justice, but also to ultimately reduce violence in our communities, because that is the goal of this program is to enable both collaboration and cooperation that's predicated on cutting edge technology to fundamentally reshape the trajectory of our communities to make them safer for our children, for our families, and for all of us who remain committed to the work of trying to deliver justice to the people of New Mexico. And with that, I'm happy to stand for any questions that you may have.
This is Ben Schlittler from KRQE. So you brought up how you were able to link it to over 500 gun crimes, correct?
That's
It
correct.
was over
Yeah.
500. Do you know what the breakdown of those specific crimes were? Like how much were this, how much were that, et cetera?
So I don't have the breakdowns available right now, but we can provide that information and follow up with detailed not only information about the incidents that we're referencing, but also the active criminal cases that have been strengthened by this type of technology.
All right, we have several people online. Joshua Bowling, I see that you're online. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask a question?
Yeah, thanks so much for letting me doing some online capability missions there. Speak a little bit to Phoenix.
Yep.
So can you speak a little bit, but maybe use law enforcement?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Joshua. I think one of the things that has already been apparent in the 9 months that the program's been operational is the extent to which we are already making connections between violent crimes that are occurring in Albuquerque and firearms that are recovered in other jurisdictions. We have long known, for those of us in law enforcement, that crime guns are passed from usually within groups and usually within criminal organizations that share those weapons to engage in a variety of different criminal activities. Now, certain types of criminal events are singular in nature, and they don't evidence that sort of pattern of both traveling outside of the community or being passed around within a group. But up to this point, over 50% of the firearms that have been tested have shown that they are crossing jurisdictional boundaries, meaning the leads that are being developed are actually not in the jurisdiction where the firearm was recovered and test fired. And so what that demonstrates is guns that are being used in the streets of Albuquerque, they may actually be coming from Ohkay, Owingeh, or they may, guns that are originating in Farmington may then end up in Gallup and then may end up back in Farmington at a later time. In other words, depending on the nature of the crime, particularly crimes related to drug trafficking organizations, you heard the sheriff reference a crime spree that had occurred in Albuquerque over several months. It's not surprising to us at all that the recovery happened in connection with the traffic stop where there was also fentanyl recovered at the scene. That indicates to us that this is a weapon that was probably used not only by the suspect, but also potentially members of the organization that were engaged in drug trafficking and other types of crime. Because a lot of people have a misunderstanding that criminals only commit crimes in discrete buckets or only commit crimes in discrete locations. And what we know about the pattern of criminal conduct generally is that a lot of times a gun that can be used in a drive-by on one day may be used in connection with a drug deal a week later, and then may pop up in a confrontation outside of a bar the next month. And those three events that I just described may not all occur and likely aren't occurring exclusively in one community, right? And so it's the ability to see not only crime types, but crime locations, and the common denominator is the weapon itself. And that's really what the power is that it illuminates connections that before this technology was available to people, what would happen is you would have a detective who would work on the drug deal case, you would have a detective working on the drive-by, and you would have a detective separate detective working on the confrontation outside of a bar, they may all be operating in different jurisdictions and they all have a narrow view and they don't know that they're actually looking at the same potential suspect or potential suspect criminal group that is facilitating and using that gun to commit all three crimes in all three jurisdictions. And so that's the real power of this. It also, and this is something that we didn't highlight in the opening remarks, when we have enough data and we have a much deeper and richer understanding of crime guns and how they move through the state, we will also be able potentially to detect patterns of trafficking. We will also be able to detect origins of particular locations where a straw buyer may be focused on a particular store, a particular location. And so we can see patterns of gun trafficking. And so ultimately there are two large sort of overarching goals from a law enforcement standpoint. Number one is to develop the kinds of leads that we're talking about here today. But number two, for our agency to look above those individual leads and think more strategically about how we can disrupt the movement of crime guns through and across the entire state. I don't think we're at a place yet to detect that pattern of movement, but it's my hope and I expect that once we have enough data, we're going to start seeing how these guns travel in more distinct patterns, and then we'll be able to develop organizational level prosecutions and investigations that will disrupt that flow.
All right, we have Nikayla McClellan from the Albuquerque Journal online. Nikayla, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes, please. Good morning. My question for you is that you said that you want to hopefully have coverage across all the Mexico point. Do you have an idea of where those other locations would be or how many machines you would need to get that covered?
Yeah, I think in order to get full coverage, we probably have to have at least 3 more machines. I can tell you that the single biggest spot that I'm concerned about right now is actually in the Northeast, in San Miguel County, and in that part of the state. I think those agencies still have to travel the furthest to have their firearms evaluated and to have casings examined. We know that there are some machines at DPS in Santa Fe, but they're still not fully integrated into everything that we do, and they're not still fully available to participate to local law enforcement. That's something that I hope the next administration will change. It's a policy decision that will change, but I will be working both with state appropriators and federal appropriators to try and get the funding necessary to establish those other 3 sites. As you may know, we first asked for the funding for these machines at the state level, and that request was denied. And so ultimately we had to go to the federal government to get funding for this program. I hope now that we've established that this really works and we have real testimonials from law enforcement officers that when we go back to the legislature and ask for funding for additional coverage, that they'll be more receptive.
All right, we've got time for about one more question. We've got Catherine Lane from KOAT online. Would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question? It looks like Catherine Lane took a break. And so if you've got any more comments you want to wrap up with, we can wrap up our press conference now.
No, I want to thank everyone for paying attention to this important work. I know with New Mexico's covered ongoing public safety and gun violence issues that it can be discouraging, but I think this is a really important moment for us to reflect on something that is demonstrating its effectiveness, its an ability to be smart on crime, it's an ability to be proactive, and to use a new type of collaboration to start to pull the curtain back on what's happening in our communities. I'm excited to hear that we're going to be test firing, 300 weapons that have been sitting in storage, and who knows what that will yield in terms of surfacing potentially cold cases that have yet to be solved. So again, I appreciate the cooperation and support of these leaders, and I just want to remind people that we're just getting started and there's a lot more left to do. So thank you.